I never thought I'd end up here, spilling my guts to strangers online, but I guess that's where life takes you when everything you've built comes crashing down. My name is Eric, and I've been married to Melissa for 12 years. We have 2 kids, Dylan, 10, and Ava, 8. A cute little house in the suburbs, and what I thought was a rock-solid marriage. I won't pretend we were perfect. Life with 2 kids is busy, messy, and sometimes monotonous. We've had our ups and downs like everyone else. Arguments over chores, balancing work, parenting, and finding time for ourselves. But I always thought we were on the same team. Melissa and I had this unspoken understanding that no matter what, we'd face life together. Looking back, I think the first signs of trouble started about 6 months ago. Melissa started changing little things. She got a new gym membership and suddenly became obsessed with her workouts. She'd spend hours at the gym or running errands, and she started dressing up more than usual. I remember joking, "Who are you trying to impress?" She laughed it off, saying she just wanted to feel good about herself. First, I brushed it off. I mean, she's allowed to want to look good and feel confident, right? But then, there were other changes. She started guarding her phone like it was Fort Knox. Melissa, who used to leave her phone lying around everywhere, now carried it with her everywhere she went. Even in the bathroom. She'd laugh nervously if I asked why and mutter something about work emails or mom group chats. I tried not to let my imagination run wild. I told myself I was being paranoid. Probably because I'd been working extra hours at my IT job, and we hadn't been spending as much time together. But then she started canceling date nights, saying she was too tired or busy. I remember one night specifically when I suggested we put the kids to bed early and watch a movie together, just the 2 of us. Melissa sighed dramatically and said, "Eric, I'm exhausted. Can't we just do this another night?" She stayed up late on her phone instead. That was the first time I had this nagging, sick feeling in my stomach. Something was wrong. I just didn't know what it was yet. Fast forward to about 3 weeks ago, and that nagging feeling had turned into full-blown paranoia. Melissa was becoming more distant by the day. She wasn't just tired or busy. She seemed irritated with me all the time. If I asked her how her day was, she'd snap, "Why do you care?" Or if I brought up spending time together, she'd roll her eyes like I was the biggest inconvenience in her life. One night, I decided I couldn't ignore it anymore. I had to know if something was going on. I'll admit it, I snooped. I've never done that before, not once in our entire marriage. But her behavior was so out of character that I convinced myself I had no choice. While she was in the shower, I grabbed her phone from the nightstand. My hands were shaking as I unlocked it. She'd given me her passcode years ago, and thankfully, she hadn't changed it. I told myself I'd only check her texts and maybe a couple of apps. I started with her messages, scrolling through her conversations with her friends and family. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary. I was about to put the phone down, feeling guilty and relieved, when I noticed an unfamiliar name in her contacts. Jake Person Lifting Weights. My heart sank. My brain immediately screamed, "Who the hell is Jake?" I clicked on the thread. At first, it looked innocent, short messages about gym schedules and workouts. But as I scrolled up, the tone changed. Flirty emojis. Inside jokes. Then, buried in the middle of the conversation, I saw a message that shattered my world. "Jake, last night was amazing. Can't stop thinking about you. Melissa, me too." Face blowing a kiss. "I'll see you tomorrow, same time." I froze. My chest tightened, and my ears started ringing. For a second, I couldn't breathe. My wife, the woman I'd loved for over a decade, was cheating on me. The water in the bathroom stopped running. Panic set in as I scrambled to put her phone back exactly where I found it. I felt like a deer in headlights when she walked out of the bathroom, towel wrapped around her, smiling faintly. "Why are you staring at me like that?" she asked. I fumbled for an answer. Just thinking about something from work." She shrugged and went back to scrolling through her phone like nothing had happened. Meanwhile, I was sitting there, dying inside. That night, I didn't sleep. I laid in bed beside her, staring at the ceiling, wondering what the hell I was supposed to do next. The next morning, I woke up determined to confront her. I couldn't live with the knot in my stomach or the image of that text thread replaying in my mind. Melissa was in the kitchen, sipping her coffee like it was just another normal day. Our kids were eating cereal and arguing about cartoons in the background. It felt surreal to think that our entire life was teetering on the edge, and she was just calm. I waited until the kids went outside to play before I made my move. She was loading the dishwasher when I said, "Melissa, we need to talk." She turned around, giving me this irritated look. "What now, Eric? I swear, you've been acting so weird lately." I didn't waste time dancing around the topic. "Who's Jake?" Her face froze. It was like I'd hit her with a bucket of ice water. For a split second, her mask slipped, and I saw pure panic. But she recovered quickly, crossing her arms and giving me an annoyed look. "What are you talking about?" "I saw the messages on your phone," I said, my voice shaking despite my attempt to sound firm. "Don't lie to me, Melissa. I know what's going on." She laughed, but it wasn't a laugh of relief or humor. It was defensive, sharp, almost mocking. "So now you're spying on me? Real classy, Eric. Are you that insecure?" I could feel my blood boiling. "Don't turn this around on me. You've been sneaking around, lying to me, and God knows what else with this Jake guy. Just tell me the truth." Her eyes darted around the room, like she was looking for an escape. Then she sighed dramatically and said, "Fine. Jake's just a friend from the gym. We talk, we hang out sometimes. That's it. You're blowing this way out of proportion. Last night was amazing? That's what friends say to each other." I shot back. Her face turned red, but her tone stayed icy. "You're seriously going to judge me based on one stupid text? God, Eric, maybe if you paid more attention to me instead of working all the time, I wouldn't have to find someone who actually gives a damn." That hit me like a punch to the gut. I was furious. "Don't you dare try to pin this on me. I've been working my ass off to provide for this family, and you're out here sleeping with some guy from the gym." Her response was like gasoline on a fire. "Oh, grow up, Eric. It's not like you've been a perfect husband. Maybe I needed to feel like I mattered for once instead of just being mom or your wife." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "So your solution was to cheat on me?" She rolled her eyes. "I didn't cheat. You don't know what you're talking about." Her refusal to admit the obvious was infuriating. I slammed my hand down on the counter, which startled her. "Enough with the lies, Melissa. Just tell me the damn truth." Finally, she snapped. "Fine. You want the truth? Yeah, I slept with Jake. Happy now." I felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. My legs were shaking, and I had to grab onto the counter to steady myself. She said it so coldly, like it was nothing. For a moment, all I could do was stare at her. The woman I had built a life with, the mother of my kids, had just admitted to betraying me, and she didn't even look sorry. After Melissa's icy confession, there was this deafening silence between us. The only sound was the faint laughter of our kids playing outside. I couldn't speak. My mouth was dry, my chest felt tight, and I swear my legs were about to give out. Melissa broke the silence first, rolling her eyes and muttering, "Well, you wanted the truth. Now you have it. Can we move on? Move on." I couldn't believe the words coming out of her mouth. It was like she didn't grasp or didn't care about the weight of what she'd just admitted. "Move on," I repeated, my voice cracking. "You destroyed our marriage, and you think we can just move on like nothing happened?" She sighed dramatically, like I was the unreasonable one here. "Eric, it wasn't like that. It just happened. I didn't plan for any of this, okay? It was a mistake. But it doesn't mean I don't love you." "Love me?" I spat the words out like they were poison. "You call this love? Sneaking around, lying, throwing away everything we've built for some guy you met at the gym? How could you do this to me? To our family?" Her defensiveness quickly morphed into anger. "Don't you dare lecture me, Eric. You think I wanted this? I've been lonely for years. You barely notice me anymore unless it's to ask what's for dinner or to complain about the bills. Do you even remember the last time we had sex? Because I do. It was months ago." I felt like I'd been slapped. Sure, things hadn't been perfect, But I thought we were just in a rough patch, like every couple goes through. I never imagined she was out there looking for whatever the hell she was looking for. And what about the kids, Melissa? I asked, my voice trembling with rage and heartbreak. Do they deserve this? Do they deserve to have their lives blown apart because you needed to feel noticed? She scoffed. Don't make this about them. This is between us. And don't act like you're some saint. You've been emotionally checked out for years, Eric. Maybe if you'd actually been a husband instead of just a paycheck, I wouldn't have needed Jake to remind me I'm still a woman. That was it. I couldn't take another second of her deflection and blame shifting. I need you to leave, I said through gritted teeth. Melissa's eyes widened, as if she hadn't expected me to draw that line. What? No, Eric, don't be ridiculous. Where would I even go? I don't care, I snapped. Go to Jake's place for all I care. But you're not staying here tonight. I need you out of this house. She tried to argue, but I was done listening. I turned around, walked out of the kitchen, and went straight to our bedroom, slamming the door behind me. For the next hour, I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the floor, replaying everything in my head. The texts, her cold admission, the way she tried to make this my fault. I didn't even hear her leave, but eventually, I noticed her car wasn't in the driveway anymore. That night, I barely slept. I kept thinking about all the moments that had led up to this, every red flag I ignored, every time I convinced myself I was just being paranoid. How could I have been so blind? That night was the longest of my life. I sat alone in the house, the quiet suffocating me. The kids were asleep, oblivious to the storm ripping through their parents' lives. I wanted to cry, to scream, to punch something, but all I could do was sit there, numb, staring at the family photo on the mantel. We looked so happy in that picture. Me, Melissa, Dylan, and Ava, all smiling like nothing could ever touch us. But now, every smile felt like a lie. Every memory tainted by the betrayal I couldn't stop replaying in my head. I couldn't stop thinking about them, Melissa and Jake. What had he done to make her risk everything we had? Was he younger, more exciting, better looking? The mental images alone were like daggers. Had she been thinking about him when we were together, when she kissed me, when we shared the same bed? Around midnight, I broke down. I sat on the floor in the living room, head in my hands, and just let it all out. The tears came fast and hard, and I felt like I was being crushed under the weight of it all. My chest ached, my throat was raw, and for a few minutes I was genuinely scared I might not be able to breathe. It wasn't just the betrayal that hurt. It was the doubt it cast on everything. I found myself questioning our entire marriage. Was she ever truly happy with me? Was this affair a one-time thing? Or had there been others? Every sweet moment we'd shared now felt like a cruel joke. By 3 a.m., I was scrolling through my phone, looking for answers. I Googled things like, how to deal with a cheating spouse, and signs of a narcissistic partner. I ended up on Reddit, reading through posts from other people who'd been in my position. Their stories gave me no comfort. If anything, they made me feel worse. I read about people who stayed and regretted it, people who left and regretted it. There was no roadmap for what I was feeling, no simple answer. I heard Ava stirring in her room, and I snapped out of my spiral for a moment. She called out softly, "Daddy." I wiped my face and walked to her room, trying to sound normal. "What's up, sweetie?" "I had a bad dream," she whispered, holding her stuffed rabbit tightly. I sat down on the edge of her bed and stroked her hair. "It's okay, honey. Daddy's here. You're safe." As she drifted back to sleep, I felt a pang of guilt. No matter what happened between Melissa and me, the kids didn't deserve to suffer because of it. I had to keep it together for them, even if it felt like my world was falling apart. But as I left Ava's room and crawled back into my own cold, empty bed, I realized something. I wasn't just heartbroken. I was angry, furious even, and that anger was starting to replace the sadness, fueling a fire inside me that I knew I couldn't ignore. The morning after Melissa left felt surreal. I woke up groggy, like I hadn't slept at all, though my body had finally collapsed sometime after dawn. I went through the motions of getting the kids ready for school, plastering on a fake smile while they argued over who got to sit in the front seat. Melissa wasn't home, and honestly, that was a relief. I wasn't ready to see her face or hear her excuses again. The kids didn't ask where she was, and I didn't volunteer any information. Once I dropped them off, I parked the car and just sat there, staring at the steering wheel. The anger from the night before was still bubbling beneath the surface, but now it had direction. I wasn't going to sit around and let Melissa call the shots. I had to take control of the situation for myself and for Dylan and Ava. I started by making 2 phone calls. The first was to my best friend, Matt. He and I had been close since college, and if there was anyone I could trust to give me straight advice, it was him. "Hey man," I said when he picked up. "Eric? You sound like hell. What's up?" "Melissa's been cheating on me," I said bluntly. There was a pause. "Wait, what? Are you serious?" I explained everything. The texts, the confrontation, the way she tried to blame me for it all. Matt listened quietly, only chiming in with the occasional "Jesus," or "That's so messed up. What do I do?" I finally asked, my voice cracking. Matt sighed. "First of all, you need to talk to a lawyer. Even if you're not sure about divorce yet, you need to know your rights. Protect yourself, Eric. And whatever you do, don't let her gaslight you into thinking this is your fault." The second call I made was to a family lawyer. I didn't have any intention of filing for divorce immediately, but I needed to know where I stood legally. Could she just waltz back into the house and act like nothing happened? What would happen with the kids? The lawyer, a no-nonsense woman named Linda, was blunt but compassionate. She explained that I had every right to ask Melissa to stay elsewhere temporarily and advised me to start documenting everything. Texts, emails, anything that might be relevant later. "Eric," she said toward the end of the call, "it's going to be hard, but you need to think about what's best for you and your kids. If reconciliation is even on the table, it's going to take a lot of work, and only if both of you are willing. If not, you need to be prepared to walk away." Her words hit me like a brick. Walking away? The idea of tearing apart our family was unbearable. But how could I ever trust Melissa again? When I got home, I went into our bedroom and started packing a bag for Melissa. It wasn't much. Just some clothes, her toiletries, and a few other essentials. I left it by the door with a note. "You need to stay somewhere else for now. We'll talk when I'm ready." I wasn't sure how she'd take it, but I didn't care. This was my house too, and I wasn't going to let her manipulate me into pretending everything was fine. For the rest of the day, I focused on the kids. Dylan wanted help with his science project, and Ava asked if we could bake cookies. For those few hours, I was able to forget the chaos swirling in the background. But as I tucked them into bed that night, I couldn't ignore the gnawing uncertainty in my gut. What was I going to do when Melissa inevitably came back? Could we even have a conversation without it turning into another screaming match? I didn't have all the answers yet, but one thing was clear. This wasn't going to be a quick fix. Melissa showed up the next day sometime around noon. I heard the crunch of her tires on the driveway and felt my stomach twist into knots. I wasn't ready to see her, but I couldn't avoid her forever. When she came through the door, she looked different. Not remorseful, not apologetic. Just annoyed, like I was the one inconveniencing her. Her eyes landed on the bag I'd packed, and she frowned. "What the hell is this, Eric?" she said, pointing at it. I stayed calm, or at least I tried. "It's your stuff. You're not staying here until we figure this out." Her jaw dropped, and for a moment, she looked genuinely shocked. "You're kicking me out? This is my house too." "No, Melissa," I said, my voice steady but firm. "This is our house, and I'm not the one who decided to blow up our marriage. You need to go. I need space to think." She rolled her eyes and crossed her arms. "You're being so dramatic. It was just a mistake, Eric. People make mistakes." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "A mistake," I snapped. "Sleeping with someone else isn't spilling coffee or forgetting an anniversary, Melissa. It's a choice. A choice you made over and over again." She threw her hands up in frustration. "Oh, my God. Are you really going to keep harping on this? I already told you it didn't mean anything. I didn't plan for it to happen. It just happened." I shook my head, my anger bubbling to the surface again. Stop saying it just happened. You don't accidentally cheat on your spouse. You lied to me, snuck around, and betrayed our family. That doesn't just happen. Her expression hardened. And what about you, Eric? You think you're blameless in all this? You've been distant for years. You barely even look at me anymore unless it's to complain or criticize. Maybe if you'd been a better husband. I cut her off. Don't you dare put this on me. I've worked my ass off for this family. I've been here every single day, taking care of the kids, keeping this house running, while you were out screwing around with your gym buddy. If you were unhappy, you should have talked to me, not cheated. For a moment, we just stood there, staring at each other, the air between us thick with anger and resentment. I thought she might apologize, maybe try to salvage what was left of our marriage. Instead, she grabbed the bag, slung it over her shoulder, and said, "Fine, I'll go. But don't think for a second that I'm going to let you play the victim in all this." She walked out without another word, slamming the door behind her. The sound echoed through the house, and for a moment, I just stood there, trying to process what had just happened. I wanted to feel relief that she was gone, but all I felt was a hollow ache. This wasn't just some argument we could resolve with time and space. This was the unraveling of everything we'd built together, and I had no idea if it could ever be put back together. Later that evening, I got a text from her. "We need to talk soon, for the kids' sake." I stared at the message for a long time before responding. "We will, but not yet." I wasn't ready to face her again. Not until I figured out what I wanted, and what I could live with. The days after Melissa left were a blur. For the first time in years, the house felt quieter than ever, even with the kids running around. I tried to focus on them, helping with homework, playing games, and making sure their routine stayed as normal as possible. But no matter how busy I kept myself, Melissa and her betrayal were always on my mind. I needed clarity. I needed answers. I needed to understand how we got here and what the hell I was supposed to do next. I decided to reach out to a therapist. It felt weird at first, like admitting defeat, but I knew I couldn't navigate this on my own. My emotions were a tangled mess, swinging between anger, sadness, and confusion so fast I couldn't keep up. The therapist, Dr. Hargrove, listened patiently as I poured everything out during our first session. "What do you want, Eric?" she asked gently when I finished. The question hit me harder than I expected. What did I want? Part of me wanted to fix things, to make this nightmare go away and pretend it never happened. But another part of me, the angrier part, wanted to walk away and never look back. "I don't know," I admitted. "I don't know if I can ever trust her again. But I don't want to destroy my kids' lives by breaking up their family." Dr. Hargrove nodded. "It's okay not to have all the answers right now. Healing, whether it's together or apart, takes time. But one thing is clear. You need to set boundaries and figure out what's non-negotiable for you moving forward." Her words stuck with me. That night, after the kids went to bed, I sat down with a notebook and started writing. I listed everything I needed to feel safe in our relationship: total transparency, accountability, counseling if we were going to try to rebuild. And then I wrote another list: things I couldn't tolerate anymore. Lies, manipulation, deflecting blame. It wasn't a decision, not yet, but it felt like a start. The next day, Matt stopped by with beers and his usual blunt advice. "Look, man," he said, cracking open a can. "You're stronger than you think. If you want to try to work this out, fine. But don't let her make you feel like this is your fault. She made the choice to cheat. That's on her, not you." I nodded, appreciating his support but still feeling torn. "What if we can't fix it? What if this just breaks everything?" "Then you'll move on," Matt said simply. "It'll suck, and it'll hurt like hell, but you'll get through it. You've got your kids, and you've got people who care about you. You don't have to figure it all out today." As much as I hated the thought of moving on without Melissa, I couldn't ignore the relief I felt at the idea of leaving the pain behind. Later that evening, I got another text from Melissa. "I want to come back so we can talk. Please, Eric. I miss the kids." I stared at the message for a long time. Part of me wanted to let her back in, to sit down and hash everything out. But the other part of me, the part that still felt raw and betrayed, wasn't ready to face her yet. Finally, I replied, "Not yet. I need more time. The kids are fine." Melissa didn't argue this time, and I was grateful for the space. I knew I couldn't avoid her forever, but for now, I needed to focus on myself and what I wanted moving forward. A few days later, I finally felt ready, or as ready as I'd ever be, to have the talk with Melissa. I texted her, "Come by after the kids are in bed tonight. We need to talk." She responded quickly, "Okay, I'll be there at 8. The hours leading up to her arrival were brutal. I kept going over what I wanted to say, the questions I needed answered, and the boundaries I needed to set. But as much as I tried to rehearse, I knew none of it would go according to plan. At exactly 8 o'clock, I heard her car pull into the driveway. My stomach churned as the front door opened, and Melissa stepped inside, looking more put together than I'd expected. She wore her usual "I've got this" mask, but there was a flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. "Hey," she said softly. "Hey," I replied, motioning for her to sit on the couch. The tension in the room was suffocating. For a moment, neither of us said anything, the silence stretching out like a chasm between us. Finally, I broke the ice. "Melissa, I need you to be honest with me. Completely honest. No more lies, no more excuses. I need the whole truth about what's been going on." She sighed, leaning back against the couch. "Eric, I've already told you the truth. I made a mistake. I slept with Jake, and I know I screwed up. What else do you want me to say? I want to know why," I said, my voice firm. "Why him? Why risk everything we've built for some guy from the gym?" Her lips tightened, and for a moment, I thought she wasn't going to answer. But then she spoke, her tone defensive. "Because I felt invisible, Eric. You barely noticed me anymore. I was just there. And then Jake came along and he made me feel like I mattered. Like I was desirable again." Her words stung, but I didn't let them distract me. "So instead of talking to me about how you felt, you decided to have an affair? Do you have any idea what this has done to me? To us?" She frowned, her eyes darting away. "I didn't plan for it to happen. It just escalated. And then I didn't know how to stop without everything blowing up." "It blew up anyway," I said bitterly. "You should have come to me, Melissa. We could have worked through it together. But instead, you lied to me over and over again." She sighed again, this time more heavily. "I know I messed up. I'm not asking you to forgive me overnight. But I love you, Eric. I love our family. I want to fix this if you'll let me." Her words hung in the air, heavy with uncertainty. I stared at her, trying to read the sincerity in her expression. Did she really mean it? Or was she just saying what she thought I wanted to hear? "I need time to figure out if I can trust you again," I said finally. "If we're going to try to fix this, you're going to have to work for it. That means no more lies, no more deflecting, and no contact with Jake. Ever." She nodded quickly. "Okay, I'll do whatever it takes. I just want my family back." I wasn't sure if her promises would hold up, but at least it was a start. By the time she left that night, I still didn't have all the answers. But for the first time in weeks, I felt like there was at least a sliver of clarity, an inkling of a path forward. Whether or not it would lead to reconciliation was still a mystery. The days following the talk were a strange mix of cautious progress and overwhelming doubt. Melissa kept her promise to cut off contact with Jake, or at least that's what she told me. She even offered to show me her phone and let me monitor her social media. While it was a step in the right direction, the paranoia that had taken root in me was hard to shake. We decided to try marriage counseling. The first session was awkward and tense. Melissa talked about feeling neglected and invisible, while I struggled not to snap at her for framing her choices as my fault. The therapist, a calm older man named Dr. Fields, guided us through the session with a steady hand. "Eric," he said at one point, "it sounds like you've been carrying a lot on your shoulders for your family." But when Melissa expressed her unhappiness, "Did you feel equipped to handle it?" That question hit me hard. Honestly, I hadn't felt equipped. I'd been so focused on being a provider and a father that I'd lost sight of being a husband. But even admitting that, I couldn't justify what Melissa had done. In private, Dr. Fields told me something that stuck with me. Rebuilding trust is possible, but it's a process. And it's okay if you decide that trust can't be rebuilt. What matters is being honest with yourself about what you want and need. I spent a lot of time thinking about that. At home, things were civil but strained. Melissa tried to be more attentive, making an effort to reconnect with me and the kids. On the surface, she seemed committed to fixing things. But underneath, I was still haunted by doubts. Every time her phone buzzed, I felt a jolt of anxiety. Every time she left the house, I wondered where she was really going. One night, after the kids were asleep, she sat next to me on the couch and put her hand on mine. "Eric," she said softly, "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I hope you'll give me a chance to earn it." I looked at her and saw a mixture of vulnerability and desperation. This was the woman I'd built a life with, the mother of my kids. But she was also the woman who had betrayed me in the worst possible way. "I'm trying, Melissa," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "But it's going to take time, and I can't promise anything yet." She nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. "I understand." As the weeks went by, I focused on myself as much as the marriage. I went to therapy on my own, reconnected with friends I hadn't seen in years, and even picked up an old hobby, woodworking, that I'd abandoned in the chaos of life. I realized that no matter what happened with Melissa, I needed to feel whole again, for myself and for my kids. The kids, by the way, were a constant reminder of what was at stake. Dylan and Ava had no idea what was going on between their mom and me, and I wanted to keep it that way for as long as possible. Every time I saw them laugh or play, I was reminded of the life Melissa and I had built together, and how much we had to lose. But as much as I wanted to protect the kids, I also knew that staying together just for their sake would be a mistake. Now, 2 months later, I'm still in the thick of it. Melissa and I are continuing counseling, and there are moments when I catch glimpses of the woman I fell in love with all those years ago. But there are also moments when the pain and doubt feel insurmountable. I don't know where this road will lead. I'm still figuring out if I can truly forgive Melissa, and if forgiveness is enough to rebuild what we had. But one thing I've learned is this: love is complicated, and sometimes it's not enough to save a relationship. If you're reading this and going through something similar, my advice is to take it one day at a time. Don't rush decisions. Focus on what you need to heal, and don't let anyone pressure you into forgiveness or staying if it doesn't feel right for you. For now, I'm choosing to stay and see if we can make it work, but with the understanding that it might not. And that's okay. Thanks for listening. This has been the hardest chapter of my life, but sharing it here has been a small step toward figuring it all out.